Okay, Alexander, we've got more news in Brexit, the never-ending saga of Brexit, which will have to come to an end in March, whether Theresa May likes it or not. Tony Blair on one side has come out publicly to say that we need a second referendum, or he believes that we are moving towards a second Brexit referendum. On the other side, we have a majority of ministers in the UK, in London, who are saying that there is going to be a Brexit, and it looks like it's going to be a hard Brexit. Theresa May has got a vote. Is it on the 17th of January?
That's right.
Okay, on the 17th of January, that she's going to have another vote of confidence, another vote on what she's proposed. Where does this take us before the new year, Alexander? What's happening here? Which direction are we moving in, or is it somewhere down the middle?
Yes. My own impression is that despite all the noise and all the fog of nonsense that is pouring out, including from people like Tony Blair, whose contributions have been hugely unhelpful, we're starting to see some clarity in the picture now. First of all, it is quite clear that Theresa May is now securely leader of the Conservative Party until March. She then came to the House of Commons after this disastrous trip that she made to Brussels, in which she categorically ruled out a second referendum. I think she did that so strongly that I don't think there's any possibility of her going back on that. I mean, one has to be careful with May, but I think if she did go back on that, the Conservative Party would split, and I don't think she's prepared to risk that. When she did that, Jeremy Corbyn proposed a vote of no confidence in her personally. And the interesting thing that happened was that the Conservative Party united behind her, as did the Northern Irish Party, the DUP. So what I think is going to happen is that on the 17th of January, her deal is going to be put before the House of Commons. I predict it will be voted down. I don't think Jeremy Corbyn can turn around and say he's going to support it after he has so strongly bad-mouthed it in the past. And, of course, we have at least 100 Conservative MPs who said they will vote against it. So it will be voted down on the 17th of March. I think that Theresa May will stick by the position that there will not be a second referendum. I cannot see any mechanism for forcing a second referendum if the Prime Minister and the government opposes it. So that leaves the only way forward now as a no-deal Brexit. And in fact, what we're hearing is that the civil service, the government bureaucracy, are now finally working round the clock to prepare for that, and the military are being brought into. So it seems to me that we are now definitely heading towards a no-deal Brexit on the 29th of March. It remains a fluid situation, but as I said, that seems to me the picture now.
I take it the EU has also come to the realization that we're moving towards a no-deal Brexit, and they're preparing accordingly, because I heard they're actually starting to draft the paperwork, the documents, the studies to take them to a no-deal Brexit. Is that true?
Exactly. And indeed, not only are they preparing in earnest, but very interestingly, the British reached out to them and said, can we compare notes? And it shows you how bad the atmosphere has now become, that the EU said no. So, I mean, it would be, one would obviously expect that the EU and the British would come together and compare notes about their preparations, but it seems that they're not. So they're continuing to act at cross purposes with each other and in some ways in conflict with each other. But with both sides now preparing hard for a no-deal Brexit on the 29th of March, it seems increasingly likely that that is what is going to happen. And as I said, the events of the last week, I think, have made that look much more likely.
Now, to summarize, you believe that Theresa May will remain in power until March?
Yes.
Until the Brexit happens, the hard Brexit, the no-deal Brexit?
Yes.
After that, does that mean that we've triggered elections? Or is Theresa May going to see the UK through in the transition from the Brexit?
But my own personal view is that the reason Theresa May is secure until March is because the hardline Brexiters in the Conservative Party have managed to secure from her what they want, which is essentially a commitment that there won't be a second referendum when her deal is voted down in January, and that there will be a no-deal Brexit. Once that no-deal Brexit is done in March, the hardline Brexiters who have no time for Theresa May because of the way she basically tried to go double-cross them, as they see it, in the summer and autumn, they will no longer have any further need for her. I think they will move against her. She's already agreed that she won't remain Prime Minister and lead the Conservative Party into the next election. I think there will be huge pressure on her at that point to go, but I don't think there will be a general election. I think there will be a push by the Conservative Party to elect a new leader who will be a hardline Brexiter. It could be Boris Johnson, God help us, or it could be someone else. Mm-hmm.
How much damage has this done, and will this continue to do until March, to the UK, to the British economy, to the civil service? Is there a tangible number that the damage that this has done from Theresa May's, I don't know, just her delays and her poor negotiating and her just dragging this out for so long?
Right. It's not possible to say, to put a precise finger on this, but it has done great damage, and it's done great damage for two reasons. Firstly, it has deeply polarized the country. It has discredited even further the political class in Westminster, which has been seen to be intriguing against Brexit and the Brexit result of the referendum, which the country voted for in 2016. And of course, as a result of what Theresa May has done, we now have the prospect of a no-deal Brexit in March. Now, that may sound like a clean outcome, but it must be understood a no-deal Brexit is not the same as a clean break Brexit. What I think most people envisaged was that there would be a clean break Brexit, one in which Britain completely separated itself from the EU and all its various institutions, but that there would be a period of time which would allow British businesses and British companies and British individuals and European businesses, companies and individuals to unscramble all the arrangements that had been built up over 40 years so that a minimum of disruption was done. That transition period is not going to happen. We will simply leave the European Union on the 29th of March without any kind of transitional arrangements in place, and some disruption is therefore inevitable, even if it is not going to be, in my opinion, on anything like the apocalyptic scale that some people are talking about.
Can I ask you maybe it's a stupid question, but I mean, it's just in my mind is, what does this mean as far as EU citizens traveling to the UK on an EU passport? What does this mean for EU citizens, for UK citizens that are residing in Spain, in Greece, and Italy? What does this mean as far as if they're buying property, if they're working in the EU? Is all this stuff now getting sorted out in this next 3 months, or will this kind of be some of the bumps that you're talking about, and people really don't know how we're going to deal with all these? Well, these are very real things, very real issues.
Well, they're very, very real things, and that's why, as I said, a no-deal Brexit, which leaves all these things unanswered, is not the optimal solution. Let's be very clear about that. But can I say, to give you an idea of how great the uncertainty is, Theresa May was asked this very question in the House of Commons, I think it was today, and she said, well, of course, we will allow EU citizens who are already here in Britain to continue to remain, and we're going to make all these arrangements so that they'll be able to travel backwards and forwards. Those are the citizens that are already here. And we hope that the EU will reciprocate by doing the same to our citizens. In other words, it is no more than a hope. There are no firm commitments. And with the EU and the British government, not talking to each other at the moment to compare their no-deal Brexit plans. I mean, we're leaving it horribly close to the wire to sort all these things out. I think they will be sorted out because it's in everyone's interests that they will be. But it shows you what a bad result Theresa May's incompetent negotiating has produced.
At the end of the day, as we approach, we'll see as we approach this hard Brexit, this no deal, hard Brexit, do you think that the EU has come away with a win here? I mean, you mentioned some of for the UK. This is going to be a very bumpy road ahead. They will get over it though. They will get over it. Yeah. If there's a no deal Brexit on the 29th of March, it's a loss. It's a loss for the EU. I mean, Britain is a big economy. It's either the second or the third biggest economy within the EU. For the EU to lose it and to lose access to it through a no deal Brexit is bad. If Britain goes ahead and prospers outside the EU, it's even worse. So for them, it is the worst possible outcome, actually. Now, can I just say something about this? Because, of course, one of the effects of Theresa May's incompetent negotiating is that I think it led the EU and the Remainers, the Remain camp in Britain, to overplay their hand. And if the Remainers, if people like Tony Blair, instead of agitating for a second referendum, had campaigned for the softest possible Brexit, for a Brexit that kept Britain within the customs union and within the European single market, but obviously without a backstop, they might have achieved it. But by going for broke, by agitating for a second referendum, which is clearly intended to keep Britain inside the EU as a fully fledged member, and by getting basically a lot of people within Brussels and elsewhere to quietly back them, I think all that they've actually achieved is that they've greatly increased the prospects of a no-deal Brexit, which is not in their interests. Yeah, once again, they couldn't come to grips with the reality that 17 million people in the UK had indeed voted.
17 and a half.
17 and a half had indeed voted against the globalist agenda. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about, isn't it?
Well, indeed, Alex. But as we've discussed many times, European leaders and reality don't often correspond very well. I mean, that's the problem. That's been the problem with the whole direction that the EU has been taking for some time now, and for a long time. And I'm afraid it's also true of their supporters, a lot of their supporters in Britain. I don't think they've really grasped the fact that, as I say, Britain is going to leave the EU. I think they thought they could find some way to stop it happening. And by trying to stop it happening, they're making the no-deal Brexit, clean break outcome much more likely than it might otherwise have been. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can I make one final observation, Alexander? I like your insight on this. I asked you the previous question about the EU, how much is it going to affect the EU? Because it seems to me, at least the press conferences that I've seen with Juncker and Tusk, they don't seem very fazed by the whole thing. They seem to be pretty calm and almost pretty jubilant, as if they've won something. And I kind of sit there and I say, well, is the EU, maybe they're making an example of the UK and they're going to scare other countries like Italy and these countries from, daring to think about leaving the orb that is the European Union? Yes. Or are these guys just so in their own little bubble, in their own oligarch, sitting high on the mountain, high on the throne kind of world, that they don't realize that, for the EU, this is a huge loss?
Yes, there's a lot to unpack here. Now, can I just go back to a program that you and I did a little while ago, in which I said that there are some people within the EU bureaucracy who are not sorry to see Britain go, and the reason is that the British have always been the awkward squad within the EU. Of course, now there are other countries like Hungary which have taken that much further, but the British have always been a disruptive influence because they've never been fully committed to the whole EU project in the way that, say, the Germans and the French historically have been. So there is that side. But of course, I think overall, the EU leaders still think that, they've got the British where they want them with this deal that Theresa May has negotiated. And I think they haven't quite figured out the fact that Britain is actually now increasingly looking like it's going to leave with a no-deal Brexit on the 29th of March. And I think you're absolutely right in saying that these people live in a bubble. I think they cannot comprehend that after the initial period of disruption that Britain will undoubtedly experience in March and April, things will sort themselves out and the British economy will adjust, and Britain might easily prosper, and then that will be an EU without Britain anymore, and with Britain potentially doing well. I don't think these people are able to comprehend that. I think that is so far outside their own mindset and world, in which everybody wants to join the EU, everybody wants to be a part of the EU, where the advantages of EU membership are taken for granted by the political class, that I just don't think they're really able to sort of adjust to this or to take it in properly. And I think there will be an awakening, but the EU needs to wake up to lots of things, and of course they're not able to at the moment.
Yeah, I'm gritting a little bit as you were speaking, Alexander, because to me, once the UK, which I also agree, the UK economy is going to really kick into high gear after this, 3 to 6 month phase of getting over this Brexit. Once it starts doing well and it starts really ramping up its growth, for the EU leaders, they're going to probably, this is like their worst nightmare, because what this is going to tell other countries, the Italies, the Greeces, the Hungaries, everyone, they're going to say, so you're telling me if I were to leave, I may actually, I'll survive, I'll be okay. The sun's going to rise again without the EU.
Well, it is. Well, bear in mind, Germany is now probably in recession. France, I think, is definitely in recession. Italy is in recession. In France and Italy, opinion against the EU is running strong. In fact, I think that in both of these countries, anti-EU sentiment is now in the majority. If a country like Britain is able to leave the EU and do well outside it, well, of course it will have an effect on people in Italy and France if they see recessions continuing there and their economies continuing to do badly. So, of course, it's a bad outcome for the EU. I don't think they have the imagination or the ability to see it.
Yeah, because living in the EU, you're fed constantly 24/7 the narrative that outside of the EU, you're finished. You're going to falter. There's no survival. Everything is about being inside the EU. And now you're going to have the first real case study of a country leaving Europe. And if it starts to prosper, what does that mean?
Well, I think to answer your question, which again is a rhetorical question, it is an existential threat, given the state of the EU now, given, as I said, that the euro has proved an unsuccessful currency, given the continued obsession with more centralization and more integration. I think that it is an existential threat, given that the people in Europe are so obviously and visibly unhappy with what is happening in Europe now. So for the Europeans not to see that and not to understand that, I think is it's delusional. But as I said, I've said many times, including on this program, reality and the EU leadership are not in great sync at the moment.
Yeah, for all of May's shortcomings, the UK as a nation it's not a Greece. It's just too powerful and too robust to not make it outside of the European Union. Where Greece, they punished Greece and they made an example of Greece. No doubt about it.
Yes, I mean Britain is in a completely different league from Greece. I mean it's a big, powerful economy with a very highly developed financial sector and strong technology industries. There are lots of problems within Britain. I'm the first to admit them. I write about them often, but Britain is an open economy. It can certainly prosper outside the EU. There is no intrinsic or inherent reason why it cannot.
So it's just about getting over this Theresa May bump, this speed bump.
I like that very much. The Theresa May bump, which is exactly what we're facing. I mean, we shouldn't have had even that, but we have got it. And as I said, we have a Theresa May bump. But as I said, the outcome that I think many people had feared, and of course some people had hoped for, that the whole Brexit thing would unravel, hasn't happened. The reason it hasn't happened, by the way, is twofold. Firstly, contrary to what you often read, there has not been any great shift on this question in the country. Most people who voted to leave in Britain, the great majority of people who voted to leave, still want to leave. And they are very much the majority in England, which I would remind our viewers is the core territory of the United Kingdom. And secondly, there is overwhelming feeling within the Conservative Party, within the membership of the Conservative Party in the country, that they want to leave. And if we're talking about the Labour Party, that the majority of Labour members and Labour MPs want to remain. 2/3 of Labour MPs represent constituencies which voted to leave, and that hasn't changed very much either. Those are the realities that are dictating this process.
All right. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran, thank you very much for that analysis on Brexit. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below. Smash that like button. Click the notifications bell to make sure you get the video notification every time we post a new video. You can donate to us on PayPal and Patreon. And, of course, the Duran Shop, 20% off all throughout December. And don't forget, iTunes and Soundcloud. You can get an audio copy of this video and all our videos. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran, the Oracle in London. Thank you very much. Take care.